Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and today we're going to talk about playing the Guiro, and not only playing it, but reading it. So, in my career, I've run into a lot of instances where there are written Guiro parts are always written differently, and the notation, like many things, is not standard. So, the last video I did for congas for you showed some notation examples that were basically just rhythms, and then you have to decipher the right grooves to play. And that was in kind of a Motown setting. But today we're going to look at some music that's orchestral in nature, but is also derived from the Latin rhythms. So the music of Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. And you need to understand how to read these notated rhythms so that you can best realize what the conductor had in mind. So we'll be talking about that. But first, I'm going to show you a number of different instruments that I use. This is my favorite Guiro, and this one is just wood. It's a gourd, and these things are very delicate. This one has a little bit of a crack here. They will crack if you're not careful, but it is about 40 years old. And once they crack, there's not much you can do because, again, it is a gourd. So just try not to drop them. This just cracked from me squeezing it so hard while I was playing it all these years. And the crack has not spread to the ridges. So it's a hollowed out gourd. That's all it is. Same thing used for a standard chicorée, but a different shape. Obviously, that's more of a kind of circular bowl shape, where this is a longer shape. And the ridges are carved in, and then the instrument is dried. All right. It's very light. The traditional gourd ones are, not the synthetic ones. They're heavier. I'll show you those in a minute. So lightness is the key because you're having to hold it for a long period of time. And these holes here, they're meant for your thumb and your middle finger, or whatever finger you want to use. You could use your first finger if you have bigger hands. I don't. So I use my middle finger and my thumb. And you don't stick them all the way in there. You just grip it like that. And the striker, I'm just using a small piece of rattan. You can use other things. I have some other rods here for softer playing. So this particular one is just a rubber mallet. And finally, I have a really thin one that I use for very, very soft pianissimo playing. Much harder to work with because this one bends. But again, I'll show you later when I play this piece and put it on the screen. You'll see when I use that. So we also have a number of different instruments. The first one I'm going to show you, these are synthetic Guiros made by LP. So these are great because they never break. They're virtually indestructible. So that's the good news. The bad news is they're fairly uncomfortable to play, and they're a little bit heavier than a standard Guiro. So I play it with the open part up, which is the traditional way of playing it. So this instrument to me is a little too big, and I don't feel a personal connection with it as far as it doesn't flow. It doesn't feel part of my arm when I play. So the basic technique, as you saw, is you're actually moving up and down here while you're playing it. So it's based on up and down strokes. So down and then up. It's also based on long strokes where you're slowing down a little and you're doing almost like a roll, but you're swiping it. You can also do that, as in cha-cha rhythms, on an upstroke. And depending on where you play with the stick, if you play it closer to the edge, you get a different sound. A higher sound. Once you go towards the middle, it's lower. So you can adjust that and use that musically. Normally I play with my finger out against the stick like this. And it's a wrist motion. There's no finger movement or anything. And that's the kind of thing. So you're going... If you ever played gospel tambourine, where you move your hand with the tambourine and then your other hand, it's very similar to that. All right, now, you know, if you play in a wedding band and the singer grabs one of these and they're doing this, that's not the way you're supposed to play, but I guess you could. There's no rules. There are mounts for this particular instrument, this particular instrument, and I'll show you those. I do not have my up and down mount here, but several companies make those. I think Meinl makes one, maybe Pearl, where there's a bottom ring and a top ring. You can make one yourself out of wood, and then it sits in there like this. I prefer what I've done here, which is I took an LP claw, which they use for mics, and then I basically put it in here in this hole. You see that hole there. Kind of looks like an alien when you look at it that way. And right there, it's meant for mounting, okay? And these rubber grommets here are meant for holding, all right, just so you know. And you can put that in there and mount it like this or this. So I've played in Latin bands where I play actually that with my right hand, and I play other things with my left hand. And I've done setups, multiple percussion setups like that. We have to just scrape. Just little brief things with the orchestra. Then we have the metal Guiro, better known as the cheese grater. And this is the torpedo version. This is old. I don't even know if they make these anymore. It's an LP. I'll have to see. There's other versions of this used for merengue. Normally those will be hollow up top and bottom, and they're bigger. And the grooves are smaller. That's why we call it the cheese grater. But this isn't a well-used instrument. In other words, it's not normal that you'll play this in an orchestra. It's mostly used for merengue, which is a groove from the Dominican Republic, very fast, used for dancing. Now this thing rings a lot, and it's very heavy, so it's not a lot of fun to play, and it's uncomfortable with this handle. The other ones, the bigger ones, are much lighter because they don't have the top and the bottom, all right? But same kind of idea. You're playing it here with a pick, all right? You know, remember the old afros? That's what that's used for. Sounds perfect on this. All right, so that's called the torpedo or the cheese grater, but it's a metal Guiro. Let me put this down here. But back to the original one, the real one. This is what I suggest getting, okay? And maybe if you find a few of them that are small like this, buy them. Buy a couple at a time, because again, they will crack over time. Even from, you know, if you take really good care of it, just from playing it and squeezing it, it's just the nature. They're very thin and fragile. All right, so let's talk about how I work on these techniques. And I actually just use rhythms. So we'll bring the stand over here. And I'll use rhythms from my book, like I do when I work on a lot of coordination. And what you want to do is start out, if we look at page 7, and I'll put it on the screen here, just some simple rhythms. I practice this at the drum set a lot. It's good for my coordination. Normally you won't be playing this at the drum set, but I have before. But in an orchestra gig or something, you rarely will do that. You'll be standing and just play it like that. But again, it really helps with coordination. And I'll use a click track. So to practice this, we'll put the metronome on, let's say, 100, and we'll play a basic samba rhythm on the bass drum and the hi-hat. And we'll just practice downstrokes. So you're swiping down like this. All right, and try to get all these notes the same length. So when I'm doing that, I'm just doing the same swipe and just practicing it. There's no movement here yet. Now, if you go to page 8 of rhythms, these are 2-note groupings. Now what you're going to do is come up. So you're going to go. So again, it's going to be down, up, and when you move down, it's like that, and the hand is tilted like this, and then when you move up, the hand moves like this. So the hands are moving like this, like windshield wipers. Okay? But opposite. So windshield wipers would do that or that, but you're doing this. So let's try a little of that. So again, up, down, up, down. You don't have to do it in any particular order, but normally I do a downstroke first. Now you can also do that with your left hand, where the left hand is taking more of the brunt off of it. So that would look like this. And you see there when I'm leaving my beater on there longer, I get kind of a roll sound. So if we go to the back of the book, to the hand-foot coordination section on page 123, this gives you some more interesting rhythms. So this is bass drum, snare drum stuff like. So you can either translate that to up and down, or just kind of sporadically play just the rhythms as they're written. So that would sound like this. So those are just ways to practice it. Now, when you get to specific music, like here's a piece that we got coming up here with the orchestra. It's by Gabriela Ortiz. It's called T-neck. And there's a part where it's just marked Guiro. And there's just rhythms, as you see here. It says play with the middle of the stick. Not sure I'll do that, but it has this rhythm. And that's probably a cumbia of some sort. It actually even says it. And we're going to go this, put this metronome down to 82, which is the tempo she wants. And this is what that sounds like. So that's one interpretation. Here's another. All right, so there I'm playing the the eighth note long, and I'm just playing everything down. Here's another interpretation. So there I'm adding lib with going down and then up as a roll. You don't want to just do this. Okay. It has to have a Guiro mentality to it as far as sound goes. We have a difficult section here at G where all of a sudden you're playing some complicated rhythms in different time signatures, which is somewhat common. I'll put that on so you can hear that. And what we'll do is we'll put on just the eighth note. So we'll put this at 252, which is double that. 1, 2, 1, 2. One, two, three. Four, five. 3, 4, 5. So you get the idea there. Now, if we have to play it softer, we would use a thinner stick. Okay? Now for short rhythms, like at H, you see here on the screen, and this is going to be the same tempo, and we'll put this back down now to 126. What you'll do is use down-up rhythms. You could do this. I'll show you both ways. You might get to the gig and the orchestra is reacting in a certain way. The conductor might want a certain sound. I would do that, you know. So I'll play it both ways. I'll play up and down, and I'll play just down. 1, 2, 3. And now I'll play it just down. 1, 2, 3. It gets a little tense when you have to do 4 in a row. You might want to just do that. But it depends if it's short, if it's long. I don't know yet because I don't know the piece and there's no full recordings of it that I can reference. And then finally, we have this long section of Guiro at S, and we're back to the same tempo. And this is a mambo, apparently, and these triplet rhythms are very soft at 389. So I might start this section with a soft or thin, stick, and then switch. So I'll show you a little of that. 1, 2, 1, 2. So as we go along, I get louder and louder. There's a crescendo mark through this whole section. It's very difficult to play with this thin stick because it bends, so it's much more difficult. If volume's not a problem, then I would definitely use this stick and go to the edge of the stick. It's easier. If you turn the page now, we have this really long section. And these are very tiring to play on the Guiro. So we have this thing, a T marked like this. I would play all those down. So this is the tempo. And you see that accent, you just play that heavier and maybe a hair longer. But when I get to the gig and I see what the orchestra is playing, I might do it like this. You can even go almost the cha-cha groove there. You just use your discretion. Again, a lot of these things are not notated specifically because a lot of times the composers really don't know how to notate them. Every time you see a Guiro part, it's going to be written a little differently. Sometimes you'll see U and D, which is up and down. Sometimes you'll see arrows for someone who actually plays the instrument. They know about it. So these are the things you run into. And then we have this difficult repeating rhythm at U, which goes like this. And that's really difficult to play over and over again. You could play it down like this, but that's exhausting, and you got to play it for like a minute, so I wouldn't suggest that. Now that tie, you can treat that tie as a long note. Which means you're going down the ridges a little longer, okay? But the accent needs to be there on the first beat. Okay, and you see how I'm moving my left hand. And then the hardest part of this whole thing is at 497. 1, 2, 3, 4. Two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So that's all down, and that's the easiest way to play it. That's a good example of these notated parts and the different ways to interpret those. There's no right or wrong way. It's just stylistic in nature. So just as a review, you just want to be able to play rhythms up and down like that, and clearly. So you just take out a book with rhythms. You can use syncopation or Gary Chester's books or my books that have a lot of rhythms in there, and go for that. And then for the drum set, you can just practice different things. You can play clave under that, like this. And just work on your coordination that way. So if you're on a gig and you want to pick that up and do that, I've done that a few times, and that's a lot of fun, and people get a kick out of it. So that is the Guiro and how it's notated and how you should interpret some of these rhythms that are written.